there's something really profound about Pluto in Aquarius. I feel like Pluto functions drastically differently than it would for us cardinal placements, for our, for your Capricorn moon and for my Cancer placements. I do not see them having the same experience at all.
Right, right.
It I would say it is more system dysregulating or overwhelming, or because it looks, when I look through my channel, and I would look at this for the last couple of years and be like, when I see those major sun moon risings placements, especially in early Aquarius, them getting almost like downloads. See, for Capricorn placements and Cancer, especially, there was more of a metamorphosis where Pluto was really playing that role of the mechanism that breaks down the caterpillar inside of the cocoon. Like, it was a lot more literal. There was a lot more actual needing to have physical breakdown, to have like emotional breakdown, and it was translating. It was a lot more difficult. It felt a lot more like work. There was a lot of things like that. But for Aquarius, I'm really seeing it be a lot more of a download. And
Mm.
that can be extremely overwhelming for someone who has no mental preparation of that, no understanding of what is happening to their, it can be extremely overstimulating to the nervous system, like I said.
Hey, what's up, good people? It's Eric Taylor, Big E Astrology, back with another episode of my Knowledge is Love Astrology podcast. Can you believe it? This is episode 291. I've got a special guest today, an amazing woman who I actually have met in person. She is a cardologist, an astrologer, and a spiritual philosopher. Her name is Rachelle, and she is Ra Intuition. Ra, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I am so glad we met a few years ago. This was in the making and somewhere in the back of my head. And, we're finally getting it to happen. And I love talking astrology with a fellow astrologer. But you're more than that. So we're going to get into a little bit of everything. So I want to start off, what is and how do you define the spiritual philosopher? Because I love that.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a really interesting background in being introduced to many different forms of religion and spiritual practices and modalities. And so I was, at a really early age, I had access to a lot of different um, forms of consuming spirituality or
Mm.
processing spirituality. And so one of the conclusions that I came through studying it, because I was like, why are we fighting over this? Why are we, what, like, what is it at the core? And so my Cancer and my Taurus Mars really likes to break it down into like food metaphors. And so one of and so one of the metaphors that I use, is that I like to study what is feeding people, what is soul food, right? Like, what is feeding people's soul? And
Mm.
it's really getting down to, for me, as long as you're getting access to spiritual nutrients, and it has all the micro, macro. I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end.
Okay.
I,
You sound great over here.
okay, good. So basically, I look at it, and I also see with religion and with spirituality is you can have that spiritual nutrients be over processed, right?
Mm.
And so we, in our food, we need there to be love infused into it. We need it to have all of the building blocks that makes up our physical reality. And spirituality needs the same thing. And so you can access that anywhere in the world through most forms of religion and spiritual practices, as long as you as long as it contains all of those elements, which is like love and having like a really core foundation in what has worked for us and our ancestors for since the beginning of the beginning. And that is what I use. So in my practice, I'm very open to any language that works for people. Because every spiritual religion or modality has its own language. And my only concern is it feeding you? Right. So
Mm.
there can be addictive additives in spiritual modalities, and there can be over processed where like the love is removed from religion or spiritual practice, and that's all stuff that the humans do, right? um
Humans be humanin.
humans be humaning. And part of our journey of figuring out like what is the material reality versus what is the spirituality and where they coexist. And so that is one of the ways that I apply everything I do is back to that. Is it getting to the core of what people's soul needs to be full?
And I love that, and that's very Libra, like kind of ninth house of you, right? In
Yeah.
terms of having harmony and
Hmm.
harmony and peace, and seeking balance in your wisdom, beliefs, and philosophies. So I really
Yes.
love that. Now, growing up, were you raised with any organized religion?
So my grandmother, who was more like um, more of the nurturer, I should say. So she played a lot of the nurturing role. She took care of most of my basic needs on a regular basis, and she was a Christian, and she was very loving and an amazing Pisces woman.
Oh,
And my mother was, at least to me, she was. Our sons trined like to the degree, and I she just knew how to love me, right? And my mother, who I had a little bit more difficulties with, she actually was very spiritually aware. She had a lot of spiritual knowledge. We had books all over the house growing up. I had access to China. She was really into Chinese astrology. And so
really?
so I was exposed to that first. Um, and was aware of other forms of astrology from as long as I can remember. Like I don't remember not knowing. She was a
So what
certified.
what year are you? You're the what?
Oh, I'm a horse. I'm a metal horse.
Okay, I'm a double
Yes,
metal dog.
a double metal dog. Oh yeah, You know what? I see that a little bit, and it's not my expertise. Like Chinese
No,
astrology,
I
I
I
always
know very little.
Yeah. And so I always tell people that the modality has to speak to you. I've tried to learn how to palm read many, many times, and it doesn't stick. And so,
Right.
and sometimes that's the case with astrology for people. And so that's always okay. You have to find the modality and the language that your speaks to your channel that you can absorb,
Yeah.
and for me, the Chinese didn't stick, but I knew that there was good information there. I do reference it once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, but my
Well, it's been
expertise,
really, really hitting hard, especially as we're on the verge on the 29th, going into the year of the
Nate.
snake with the Aquarius new
Yeah,
moon. This
yeah.
year, the dragon has been really tough on California, which is the dog. So I know California, they may not be aware, but I know they're like, oh, please get this dragon year off me.
Yes.
It's been
Yeah,
really tough.
yeah,
So
I really, really see
So
that.
wait. So that's fascinating. So you kind of had this integrated and kind of at your fingertips early on. So who was 10-year-old Rachelle? And could she have ever imagined the mother, the spiritual philosopher, the cardologist, the astrologer, all this stuff? Was this kind of like what you envisioned in a way?
So, I would say that it took me a really long time to see how I could merge spirituality with my work or get paid for that. It took me a
Mm,
really long time to accept energy exchange for my gifts and for
yes.
that, and to understand um, that that it's a mutual exchange of energy, and that people want to, when you're giving to them, that they want to be able to give back. But I did have some um thoughts about that early on. I always knew I wanted to help people. I
Okay.
always knew that, I have a Cancer stellium in the sixth house of service and, like, doing all of those things.
That
So I
Cancer, Sun, and
always,
Moon, you're about helping and teaching folks and all that.
yes.
Yeah.
And I have the exalted Jupiter and the Chirons right there. And so there's a lot of peer support built into that as well. But I always knew that. I always knew that. And then I always studied spiritual practices more in private. If you knew me, you knew I was into it, but I wasn't announcing it because I was afraid they were going to burn me at the stake, to be
Oh,
honest.
oh my.
And so, and so, so it was complicated, political environments, I guess, that I was in. But that I got some energy healing when I was older, and that really helped with a lot of that. And so I've been able to come out since then more. I I will say that when I really got into astrology, I was 11 when it really found me. A lot of astrologers say astrology found me,
Yeah.
right? So I was a natural with the cards, and I was a natural with using rituals and things like that. I could just pick it up and kind of knew what to do with it. And then with astrology, I just found it fascinating. When I was 11 years old, I actually was a runaway.
Really?
My grandmother had passed away, and I was having a really hard time. It's actually a really fascinating story.
I'm sorry to
But
hear that.
my
Yeah.
my mother and I were having a really hard time getting along. And when my grandmother passed away when I was 11, after I had been helping taking care of her for a while, um, I kind of just took off. And um, I tried to go to school as a runaway when I was 11, and the counselor, to give you some context, the counselor came up to me and said, I am sorry, but I have to tell your mother that you're here. And so, because they understood the situation, and so I left, and I had an interesting adventure with all of that. And I would go to the library
That's
during the
so
day.
dangerous, though. An 11-year-old girl, like, where are you going?
I had a lot of friends that I would stay with that were my age. It was a complicated home situation that a lot of people were aware of, and so a lot of people were understanding
Okay.
of of that. And then, yeah, I did get myself into some sketchy situations for sure. That did There was some but I was somehow very, very divinely protected compared to what could have happened.
And
So
that's good to hear. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Because
I
that's
I
like,
do. I mean, I've definitely been through a lot, but when I was out a runaway, I was divinely protected for sure. And because the things that happened to my peers and the things that could have happened, there's no other explanation for how I am,
oh
like,
yeah, oh
still
yeah,
here.
and
So I would
that
go to the library during the daytime when everybody else was, because they told me I couldn't go to school. So I went to the library instead, and I would go to the area, the fifth floor in the pseudoscience section. I think we've gotten them to change it from pseudoscience to metaphysics. But back then it was called the pseudoscience section, and I was reading all the books instead of going to school. And while I was there, the astrology just stuck, and it really made sense to me. And it really helped me make sense of why some people reacted differently to the same situations, or why people had different views on the same topic. And that really spoke to me. And I really wanted to understand that and make sense of the chaos that was going on in my life. And
you were a deep young lady.
yeah, I for sure. And then I decided that I went back and forth. I tried to test astrology to see if it was wrong, or to see if it was like a placebo or whatever. I tried every way to kind of like test it and test the system. And I decided, maybe I'm just into psychology. Maybe I just want to help people that way. And so I went into social work and I studied um, behavioral health, and I
Okay.
did a lot of social justice work. I was a poster child for other youth who had been in my situation.
Runaways and yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of speeches and
Well, I'm laughing inside because when I think about like psychology and behavioral stuff, as astrologers, that's what we do every day. You know what I mean?
yes,
Like people don't realize, right? And I think a lot of my clients, I can see they're surprised because I like to, like what you're talking about, I like to go deep into the fourth, sixth, eighth, and 12th, right? And I'm very spiritual, intuitive, and psychological with the astrology. And as you know, it encompasses like everything. I tell people the birth chart is the map of your life. It's the remembrance of your soul. This is what you
yeah,
selected. I'm just the spiritual guide helping you to remember who you're
right.
supposed to be and who you chose to be. And I think that when we start to really explore and see how deep and mental it is, I mean, I could see you running those tests, but it's like astrology, you can't run away from it. It's always there and it's always on point. Like it blows me away. Every day of my life, I'm like, oh my God, look at this. Oh, look at that. Like, you know what I mean? And I have 4 sons. I know you have a daughter. And so when
Yeah.
you actually get to see it play out even in your relationship with your child or in their lives, I mean, you just can't refute it. You can't deny it. It's so powerful.
No, absolutely. And that was one thing, because I was studying by myself. I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have someone who was walking me through this. And so
Um,
I was just scraping through any book I could find. And then, as I got older, the internet started being more available. And so I was able to really get into some like Astro Cafe and
Well,
like some of
did you
those.
did you find like a guru or did you start taking astrology classes with someone or did you study formally?
I did later, but I think when I started to have more of a guru was on the internet. I mean, in 2008, some of the YouTube astrologers really popped off,
Mm,
and I had access to some of them, and I would go back and forth and study their philosophy. I enjoyed looking at their charts and seeing how they were seeing the different perspectives and their ethics around their practices, and then comparing that. But I would say I really had some major clicks. I had some major profound understandings of astrology during my Saturn return.
ah,
That's when I really saw the detailed predictive elements in astrology in a new profound way, where you couldn't deny that this was predictive and that it was far more detailed and accurate, because I had been studying it more from a psychological perspective
right, right.
and
Well,
and
that
using
makes
it.
a lot. So let me ask you this. So for the audience, Ra is an Aquarius rising, Cancer
Yes,
sun, Cancer moon, Jupiter, Venus, Chiron, and then she mentioned her Mars and Taurus. And I
yes.
I want to I want to talk about that for a second because I know you like plants and gardening. When I saw Mars and Taurus, I was like, oh, Ra's good with those plants. But also one thing I always associate and I refer to my clients, like Michael Jackson had Mars and Taurus. So what do you do to kind of like activate that energy? Is there a lot of like, are you into like yoga or kickboxing or dance? Because you got to kind of move with Mars and Taurus.
Yeah, so I mean I actually played a lot of sports. I When I was a kid, we were out and about a lot. I have Gemini on the IC, and then it's also in whole sign would be the fifth house. But so I played lots of different sports, and I do a lot of swimming. So
Ah,
I was a lifeguard for like 7 or 8 years, and I taught water aerobics, and I actually still teach water aerobics.
really? Okay.
Yeah, I teach between 4 and 6 classes a week. And so I'm an instructor at a couple of LA fitness gyms.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So that Mars and Taurus is getting some good use now. But do you have a green thumb, and are you into gardening and your plants?
You know what's funny is I've always said that I had a hard time keeping plants alive, but I actually managed and organized several community gardens.
Really?
Yeah, when I did my terms of service, and I've always really wanted to. It's something I always really wanted to, and I manifested a couple of years ago. I was like, man, I really want to get some house plants and really try to do it this time, because I would have a hard time keeping plants alive actually.
Really?
And so I was like, I really want to work on that. And for my birthday, a lot of people got me plants. There was like, and none of them knew each other. None of them,
Oh, that's great.
and I was like, oh, and so I was able to keep those plants alive. And so I've been kind of growing that collection. And I would ideally like to grow my own food and do all of those things.
Oh, that's exactly what the planetary alignments are talking about,
Yeah.
right? Because I've been explaining to people with the last few full moons and new moons, and we, have the new moon coming up on the 29th, the importance that we have to, with Pluto leaving Capricorn, and we're going to get to it because you're the one to talk to, it's on your ascendant, Pluto in
Hmm.
Aquarius until 2044, that we have to say goodbye to the old structures, the old systems in society, but also in our own lives, right? Our own personal boxes and matrix, and living in a Saturnian bubble matrix, and our own programming and our own restrictions and limitations, right? Key Saturn words. It's time for freedom and liberation. It's time for us to push the envelope. It's time for us to transmute and transform and heal, and to get on a higher vibration and frequency. So what I'm kind of curious when I think about that is, how have you been doing since November 19th with Pluto on the ascendant? Share with the collective for an Aquarius rising. How's
I'm
it been feeling?
You know what? It actually feels really good. The Pluto every time, because it's retrograded a couple of times, and
Yeah.
it was opposing my sun. My sun's at 28 degrees of Capricorn, or sorry, Cancer. My sun's at 28 degrees of Cancer, and so it opposed it, and it had also opposed all my other Cancer placements for the last 16 years.
Yeah.
And when those happened, those were very difficult aspects for me. Though every time it would oppose one of my personal planets, those were very hard moments in my life.
Yeah. No, Pluto
And
oppositions are not easy to like
no,
a sun
and
or moon. Yeah. No.
no, it was really, really hard for me, especially the moon opposition, and all of that was really difficult. But um, every time that it would retrograde out into Aquarius, I would feel this really big relief. The
Mm.
energy felt fresher. There was more optimism. And it just felt like like releasing old demons, right? Like there was just a release from that. And so I'm very excited to have Pluto be starting to move away from my sun. I really give Pluto like a 2-degree orb, for you to really feel it. Like you'll know it's in the room, but to really, really feel those, it needs to be exact in my experience, or to be like 2 degrees away. Um, but one thing that I really saw with my intuition and my channel is when I would look and see people having 0-degree Aquarius, or like Aquarius degrees of personal placements. I really feel like this Pluto conjunctions are going to be a lot different from when your Capricorn. I know you can speak on having Pluto on your moon. That's an intense. I have never met anyone with a Capricorn, big three, that when it was exact, that they didn't have a major life event, that they didn't have something, transformative happen.
And it's so funny that you say that. I'm going to make you crack up because
Yeah.
sometimes as astrologers, we are so outwardly of service, right? I'm the Virgo, Cap, Moon, Scorpio rising, and I'm
Yeah.
more about the collective and my clients, right? And do you know? I swear this to the it didn't even dawn on me that Pluto had been in my third house since '08 and dancing on my moon. But what I realized, and I have to go back in, I have not done this to see when it was exact to my moon. But I will tell you this, since '08, it started in '04 when it was in my second house. But I basically, I've had 13 surgeries, and that all started at when I turned 34. And never spent the night in the hospital. But then a few years ago, as you may know, I almost died from a mixture of COVID, the Delta, and Valley fever. And I had a near-death experience in 2021. And so what was really profound about that is that, one, it's the only time I ever spent the night in the hospital. And I don't do anything small, Rob. When I do it, I was there for
You do
85
it.
days, girl. I was in coma for 40 days. You know, I hear these stories. Oh, I was in coma for 6 days, 5, 7. I'm like, listen, don't even talk to me unless you've been in coma 2 weeks or more. Joking, of course, but you know what I mean. Like, you know, when you do 40 days, it was very touch and go. A lot of people wrote me off. A lot of people wrote me for dead, and not rightfully so, but I get it, right? I mean, all that was going on in the world, the Delta, the COVID, it was really bad. But Pluto, and I want to talk to you about your Saturn, and even have a little discussion about Saturn, because Ra and I, we want to share with you guys today and talk about some of the astrology of 2025. And Pluto and Aquarius is kind of like, you know, it started in 2024, but it's, you know, this is a 20-year transit. So it's here for a minute. But I am so far since November 19th, it's been in my fourth house. And the thing that I've been noticing it's affecting is my dreams, the emotional mind. And so I lost my mother while I was in coma, and she's come to me quite a few times. And in one of the dreams, no lie, she was recommending at a house party and back at home in New York, she was saying to me, she was about to introduce me to this Vedic astrologer. Now, I'm Western tropical. I use the whole sign systems, but I use principles of the Vedic and of evolutionary astrology because I'm just all about getting to the truth. And there's some things about Vedic that I'm like, oh, that works no matter what. It's the way it works, the best. It works, right? But I'm still Western tropical, and evolutionary astrology, I look at the outer planets for that, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So when she was like, and then my alarm clock went off, and she was about to introduce me, and it was a woman. So I was like, should I learn Vedic? Should I do this? And I'm like, oh my God, what does this mean, Ma? You know? And then I was just like, I think I just need to have a Vedic astrologer on my podcast. So I'm in the hunt for like a really good. I was like, I want to go big game fishing. I was like, I either want KRS, right, or I want Joni Patria. I'm going to try to reach out to the big fish, but you know, someone else smaller would do too. But I do.
No, please get KRS. Please get KRS. When I started in '08, I started with KRS on YouTube.
He's incredible.
That was one of my, I consider him, he's like, I'm not a guru, whatever, you know how he is. But I really learned so much, his ethics around astrology.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't watched him in a little while, but his ethics around astrology are incredible.
Yeah.
I feel very aligned with the way that he has integrity and that he really thinks. Yeah. He really thinks about how it's going to affect people, and that's important.
No, you're right. And I really respect that. So wait, so I want to ask you this. So one thing that I think Aquarius sun moon risings, I wonder if, and you're one of them, if you guys are really ready for, because you know Aquarius, right, is a fixed air sign. And so there can be some stubbornness, some arrogance, right? Some like, you know, this is the right way to do it, right? That Saturn Uranus mix. I'm the brilliant genius and I know how to formulate it and that stuff. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But with Pluto, Pluto is virus. Pluto is toxins and detoxification. And I think all Aquarius sun moon risings, if you've never done it, this is the time to do, like I've been doing lately, like the master cleanse or parasite cleanse, right? Most indigenous cultures will do a parasite cleanse once or twice a year, or sometimes seasonal, depending on tribes or, whatever their philosophies are, right? Most
That's so
Americans, most Americans, they've never done a parasite cleanse in their life, and we get poisoned in our country more than anybody else. We got more toxins and parasites in us than freaking people in third world countries sometimes. So, what are your
yeah.
thoughts about Pluto for Aquarius, Sun, Moon, risings, in terms
Yes.
of changing the vibration and frequency of your health, your diet, and just your aura, all that stuff?
Okay, well, that's fascinating that you bring up. I have so much. I could talk about this for, it could be a whole course. Like, we could just make a whole course out of this. But to try and summarize, first of all, it's validating for me that I have been going back and forth about doing a parasite cleanse myself.
Yep.
And I have actually been channeling that I'm supposed to be doing that during this new moon. It's on my North Node.
Yep.
And my North Node falls in the 12th house in Placidus system.
Okay.
And so to me, the 12th house shows like healing and connecting to spirit and, all of those things. So I definitely going to have you send me. I've been trying to research the best way to do the parasite cleanse or find the one that resonates. So please send me some after, or,
Yeah, of course.
if
Yeah.
you
I
have some.
haven't, like I said, I haven't done the parasite cleanse yet, but I
Okay.
have done. So this was my goal for the year. My wife and I are doing, before the end of the December, we did the master cleanse, which is organic maple syrup, cayenne pepper, water, hopefully either spring or distilled or whatever, and lemon juice, right? Or
Hmm.
fresh lemons, whatever you can, use. And just doing that and then drinking, in a big canister, bigger than this, and then drinking water. And it was incredible. I didn't do it for weight loss, Ra. I did it
Right.
for inflammation, mucus,
That,
right? Because
that,
like I said, I got valley fever in
yeah.
2013, and I felt incredible. Joint pain was gone. I was running again, but running faster. I just felt lighter.
Mm.
And truth be told, I got skinnier than what I was when I got married in 2008. So I lost over 20 pounds, and I felt great. And now men tend to lose faster than women, but I surely didn't expect that. But that was the extra bonus. But I felt great. So then my wife and I were like, whoa, okay, we're going to go back and eat some food for the holiday for Christmas. And we knew we weren't going to eat great. So we were just thinking, you know what? We felt so good after this. We should do this once a month. So we decided, now for the winter months, it's a little colder, even though it's not freezing in Arizona. It's all relative, right? Because when you come from 110, 120, 62, 63 is freezing, right? So I can't say that to my New York friends, but
Yeah.
it's very cold out here, you guys, because we don't have humidity in Arizona, right? And Ron
It
and I,
is a different kind of cold.
it is, because it goes right through the bones when you don't have humidity. See, East Coast, where I'm from in New York, the humidity, you don't feel the cold the same way. When it's all dry climate like we are out here in the desert, it's like goes right through you. So what we realized, January, February, and March, we're gonna just do like 7 days. But then the
Mhm.
rest of the months, once a month, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this master cleanse. Probably we'll build back up to like 10 days each month, starting in April. And at some point, whether March or April, I was thinking around the equinox, I want to do the parasite cleanse. But I just had a
Okay.
friend. I
You're
had a
you're
friend that
working up
finished
to it.
one. Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm gonna let you know about it.
Okay.
But I had a friend that finished one, and what she recommends to me, I'm gonna share with you and the audience, because what's so fascinating, you guys, I am working with her. She's actually doing my Astro Life Transformational Program. It's a 5-month program, 7 weeks in terms of initial meeting, and then monthly check-ins for the following 3 months. And it's a program I'm really proud of, Rob. But what's great is that when I saw her today, oh my God, she had this glow to her. She was like more receptive and open to like really learning and understanding her birth chart, but her aura shifted just from the parasite cleanse. And she said she had stuff that she couldn't even imagine coming out of her, that
Yep.
was in her. So black walnut is really good, and there's some other things, wigworm, or black walnut, and a couple other things. Definitely, cilantro helps with heavy metal pulling, things like that. But yeah, but this is a particular parasite. So when I get the information, I will definitely share it with you, and for all you guys watching on the podcast as well. So I want to ask you though, because Pluto is the soul psyche, and it can be very psychological. Share a couple of insights or tips for our Aquarius Sun Moon Rising friends in terms of how they can face the pain, trauma, and crises from childhood, from past lives, the shadow work. What are some of your insights and tips to share with the collective for that?
I, you know, like I said, there's something really profound about Pluto in Aquarius. I feel like Pluto functions drastically differently than it would for us cardinal placements, for our, for your Capricorn moon and for my Cancer placements. I do not see them having the same experience at all.
Right, right.
I would say it is more system dysregulating or overwhelming, or because it looks, when I look through my channel, and I would look at this for the last couple of years and be like, when I see those major sun moon risings placements, especially in early Aquarius, them getting almost like downloads. See, for Capricorn placements and Cancer, especially, there was more of a metamorphosis where Pluto was really playing that role of the mechanism that breaks down the caterpillar inside of the cocoon. Like, it was a lot more literal. There was a lot more actual needing to have physical breakdown, to have like emotional breakdown, and it was translating. It was a lot more difficult. It felt a lot more like work. There was a lot of things like that. But for Aquarius, I'm really seeing it be a lot more of a download. And
Mm.
that can be extremely overwhelming for someone who has no mental preparation of that, no understanding of what is happening to their, it can be extremely overstimulating to the nervous system, like I said.
You think it
So
could be something that could even lead to like a Kundalini awakening?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I was channeling for Pluto opposing my sun, anyways. I didn't know what Kundalini awakening means, and my channel was showing me like this, like you have to look into this and like integrate some of this. And I didn't, and I had to go like research that while Pluto was opposing my sun. And I had seen that like years before it was exact. But I mean, absolutely, there can always be that with major Pluto, especially to the sun aspects. Um, but it does feel different, and it feels like there needs to be more of a conscious spiritual integration. Um, it is fascinating. So, any tips for dealing with that? Is there, I love how you say understanding instead
Yes,
of understanding.
because
I,
it
that is a profound statement to
yeah,
say. And so, there is a need to be still, especially right now. So with the transits, the retrogrades that are happening right now, like with Mars, and all of those things, there is this big need to kind of, my phone just like fell down. There is a big need to sit down, and that's what I've been telling people. Is depending on your aspects. I think it is a little bit different for people who have Mars retrograde in their chart for them. But for a lot of us, this Mars retrograde is really calling us to sit down and be still so we can receive these downloads, so we can handle what's coming through. And with the new moon, Mercury is conjunct Pluto for this
yeah,
new moon next week,
and it's
right?
been a trine to Black Moon Lilith in Libra.
Yes. Yes. And so and Lilith's been talking to me a lot the last couple of years.
Oh, she be
Um
talking.
yeah, she does. She has a when she has something to say, you will find out about it. But which I love that about Lilith. But so with that going on, it's really showing me that we're going to get messages about the undercurrents of the powers that be and what this looks like. And
Yes.
we're going to get strong strong insights about the next 20 years with
A
this
lot
new
of
moon.
revelation. A
And a lot
lot
of
of revelation
revelation.
is
Yeah.
coming. Yeah.
It's especially I want to be around. I want to be around people who have early degree Aquarius placements because they're the ones who are going to get the insights. My north node is very close to the new moon. I'm very excited to do readings for all of my clients during that week. I've been telling everybody, if you really want some profound insight into the bigger picture, into the next 20 years, and how to um I've been saying create a vision for that. It's like strategically planning is the time to strategically plan, because we will have access to more insights, you know, this week, this upcoming week.
Yeah.
And
And
that is going to
Pluto is
really help,
only,
taking the time to really sit and maybe be still with yourself. I know we all have, this dimensions, responsibilities, we have work, we have things where
yeah.
they're like, I can't just sit down and be still. But trying to carve that out, because honestly, for a lot of people, um, if you are being called to sit down and you don't, then you'll be forced to sit down in a lot of ways. And not to be scary, but I mean,
No,
a lot
that's
of
real.
people, you just get like, you get sick, right?
If
Or
you
you
don't
have
work with the
something come
energy,
up.
Ra, if you don't work
Yeah,
with the energy, it's going to work on you.
exactly.
Work
And
with it or it
so,
will work on you. So you're right in saying that. And I was
yeah,
just going to say, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
for this year, Pluto's only going to go to 3 degrees.
3 degrees, yeah.
So from 0 to 6, you're going to feel it, any sun, moon rising 0 to 6. This
Hmm.
is the year where you're like, whoa. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And you're right, it can be very heavy. But I'm feeling the same thing with you intuitively, that it's a whole different frequency and vibration in Aquarius
Hmm.
than it is. But look, we've already seen, since it went in there November 19th, a lot of freedom, liberation, right? We had Syria. We had the shift here where everything is now Republican, Senate, Congress, and president, right? We had oh my God, Syria. We had in England, a change. There's issues in Canada, Trudeau stepping down, issues in France. So it's already been breaking. Pluto has already in Aquarius been bringing in a lot of revolutionary energy. And I think we're going to see that continue. So there's been so much, really revelation and revolution, right? Even with, the need for the truth. You're going to have, like we've had, obviously before, right? Me Too movement, Epstein with Pluto Capricorn, right? The dissipation of the structures and systems. But with Pluto Aquarius, if you have not been dealing in truth, it is going to come up and come out. Pluto shows the underbelly of what? The science, the FEMA, the Red Cross, the dark web, AI, crypto. Who's really behind crypto, right?
Yeah.
You're going to see like all the nefarious stuff with, Mr. I want to go to Mars, Elon Musk, don't put no chip in my head or my hand. I want nothing to do with you, guy, right? You're going to see this stuff come up and come out. And so that there's a lot that excites me about Pluto and Aquarius, in that. And so I think it's really fascinating what you're talking about with the sun, moon rising. But so, okay, I want to touch on the Pisces North Node, right? That started on January 11th for 18 months. I think it's to July 2026. But first, I want you to share with us how people can book with you and tell them about what do you do with what is like cardology for you? Or is it tarot? Is it oracle cards? Like, so share that and how people can get in contact with Ra.
Yeah, so I book on my website. If you are local to Arizona, I do offer in person, and I have spaces for that I book when people contact me individually. Also, I am doing some specials for those that get on my newsletter. If you receive my newsletter, you go to my website, you can sign up for it, or you can contact me directly. And I do have some specials, especially for this new moon, um, at raintuition.com.
Okay. And is that your socials as well?
Yeah,
Where,
it'll be RA_intuition_LLC on Instagram. And basically, you can just type in RA Intuition LLC astrology, and it'll come up everything that I have.
I love it. So explain the cardology. What does that mean, and what do you do for your clients with that?
Yeah, so I am a natural with tarot and with the cards. I just like could pick them up as a kid and pull messages with them. I include them in most readings. I like to use both your natal chart and I pull cards as I'm called to do. I do have people who want just card readings because uh, they don't understand astrology or it doesn't speak to them. Very few though. That happens very seldomly, but I happily do that. For those that want just the cards, I have certain oracle cards that I use in addition to the tarot cards that I
Mm.
use for further confirmation, affirmations. I use just to whenever I am drawn to them. I'm really drawn to my dragon cards right now.
Oh,
Um, yeah, and I really love my mudra cards. So there is certain times in a reading when I do see a difficult transit or I see someone who's struggling to regulate their nervous system or there's something else going on, or I just see that there might be a difficult transit like Pluto going over your, Aquarius placements, for instance. And I'll pull mudra cards and with the intentions of what would help to regulate the nervous system and what would help get through this transit. And then I will pull messages along with that. So it's very individualized and it really depends on the person. And so I've had people come and they get more of a technical analysis of the birth chart. And I've had people come and they want, I don't know what is going on with this, but they'll have, all of a sudden they'll be in a mediumship reading. And I ask people if they're open to that, if they're open to this or that. And so I do respect people's wishes on what speaks to them and what they're comfortable with.
right, and
Yeah.
that's always important, right? And I try to tell people when you are an intuitive or a spiritual healer or a light worker or astrologer, right? They're all kind of all matched together. We have to have these moral codes and integrities, right? This is ancient occult knowledge and wisdom. I tell people
Yes.
this is not a game. I know that people are into like pop astrology and like, oh my God, who do I love in relationships? It's way deeper than that. And that is a part of it, relationships, career, all these different things. But I always implore people and I really tell people, like you were saying earlier about being intentional. I always like to say we need to be maniacal intentional about our self love, the positive affirmations, about our spiritual practice and discipline. It is go time, right? We've been having 2024. We had all these X class solar flares. We're going through an upgrade, Gaia Mother Earth, right? Tapping into the Schumann resonance. It's so important at this time. And we cannot play games. And that's the energy around this Aquarius new moon. We need to walk into new earth. We need to set the intention that we want to wear cotton, organic cotton, linen, and wool. We need to change our vibration and frequency in every which way but loose, in every which way we can. You know what I mean? So I'm really excited about that. So share with us, what do you think about this beautiful nodal shift? You know, we went through Aries Libra. We still got one more solar eclipse. I think it's at end of March, early April for the Aries solar eclipse, which is just a partial. But we are in the Pisces North Node, Virgo South Node. So
Yeah.
for Ra, what does that mean to you? What should we be doing these 18 months ahead?
Well, there is a lot of us, especially since Saturn has been in Pisces, and there is a lot of us working out reality versus metaverse versus the spirituality versus metaphysical. There is a lot of us are working that out on what that looks like in this new time frame that we're in. And so when the south node is in Virgo the way it is, it really can have a collective push away from the physical, the tangible. And I'm always looking to create balance with that, right? Like you mentioned my Libra over the ninth house of philosophy. I am looking with my spiritual practices to create balance. And
Yeah.
so I really
And where's your Saturn at, Ra?
my Saturn is in Capricorn. I
Oh,
have that pilot from the 1990. Remember the
yes.
Uranus, Neptune. Yeah,
And Saturn, that's right.
yeah,
I remember. Okay, okay. Saturn cap. And
yep.
I will say Saturn is a little bit better behaved than Cap, Aquarius, and Libra at home and exaltation. It's not as not. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's not as tough.
Yeah, I was lucky to have, the moon at home in Cancer and then Saturn opposing it in its home, which I think gave me, I was able with, Jupiter next to that as well, Jupiter opposing Saturn as well. I was able to mitigate some of the more difficult aspects and then use that to improve and be optimistic during those aspects to it that were
That's
more
good.
difficult. And with that Jupiter next to my sun, there is this optimism that I'm able to pull in and to look forward and pull wisdom out of those experiences. But yeah, that was hard. The Saturn return, the Pluto over all of that was crazy. So but yeah, so the with the nodals, I mean, since we're getting personal about our natal charts, I did see that going and hitting your sat that the North Node, you're gonna have a nodal return, and it's not your Saturn, but your IC.
Well, yeah, so
Yeah,
it's really cool, right? For me, I get excited about the Pisces North Node. I have that natally, and being in my fifth house, I really feel it is speaking to my children and my creativity, and some of the, ancient history and past life karma. So for me, I joke because my wife's a Pisces. So I joke and I say, babe, I got to become more like you. And her North Node's a Capricorn. And I'm like, you got to become more like me, right?
yeah,
I'm the Cat Moon. I am textbook Cat Moon in the sense of like, if nobody's dying, leave Daddy alone because Daddy's working.
yeah.
I'm like Rihanna, work, 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 work. It's like it's all the time. But with this Pisces North Node, I'm excited about it. But at the same time, I'm realizing it's starting off with the veil so thin, Rob, because it's conjunct Neptune. And I'm feeling that too. When I'm
Yeah.
doing meditations now and deep breath work, I feel like I'm sort of in and out of dimensions. Do you know what
Yeah,
I
I
mean?
I think for you, I mean, because it's so close to your IC and it's really pulling away from your MC, as the lowest part of your chart, it really does show me ancestors and like your genetic line and like bringing you back to that, bringing you back to spiritual connection to your ancestors, to all of that. And I feel like you could get so much out of that. Like it feels like you could be coming home in a spiritual sense
Yeah.
to the ways, and there's so much healing in that. There's actually a lot of studies, which I know you'll appreciate this, that show they went and studied native tribes that are more prone, not just natives here, but in Australia,
Mm.
right? Like that are more prone to diabetes, that are more prone to health effects because their bodies are not used to this food and their bodies are not used to processing it. And so what they found is that when they would go and hunt in the traditional way and eat the traditional foods, they were actually getting rid of their diabetes. When over
Wow.
here they tell you it's not curable, you're just going to have it forever, blah blah blah.
You can
um
cure anything.
yeah, and so it completely was reversed by just going back to what. So it's really, really important for people to have access to what was traditionally done and to not be influenced by whatever's working for the majority or whatever government's in place or whatever, they're benefiting from doing that. And I think for you, this could be a huge time where you're getting more insights and you're connecting spiritually and able to get some of those messages on what's working for your genes and for your family and how to balance that out with how you're showing up and what you're spreading out into the world. And
Yeah,
so,
no, thank you. That's true. And
yeah.
and do you think what do you think for we kind of touched on Aquarius Sun Moon risings, but what do you think about for the Pisces Sun Moon risings with the Pisces North Node? How do you think they are going to integrate this 18-month transit?
Well, whenever you have the eclipses, it really depends on the degree, right? And how
Yeah.
it's and where it's at. But obviously, people, when you have the North Node going over anything, you can really have a sense of coming back into yourself, depending on, like, especially if you have your sun in a less dominant place like the seventh house, or more in your private life there, or the 12th house, right? You can really have this coming back into yourself. If you are not inclined to, put yourself out there as much, there can be a lot more of self-recognition. I do have, um I know that you've studied sidereal, and so the nodes are actually considered malefic in sidereal
Yeah,
astrology,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I balance.
Rahu and Ketu, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I balance that out. I don't really consider anything to be innately evil or good or anything. I'm just like, but there is a tendency with the North Node to have a sensational urge to go towards something. And it can kind of, so we do have to be really conscious that we are, maybe not overdoing it in some
Right,
areas.
because it's consuming. We can get
Yeah.
blind spots. We go, I gotta do
Yeah.
this, I gotta do this. And it's like, whoa, slow down.
Yeah, but it really depends on, like, the aspects to it and the house placements and how, where you're at. Have you had a Saturn return yet? Have you had, two Saturn returns? And so, that can really depend on how that's going to play out for you in what stage you're in. But I do see the best case scenario is people really coming back into themselves. They're becoming more aware of themselves. They're really putting themselves out there in a new way and getting out of a comfort zone, being able to express a need and a want that they have in a new way. And that can be profoundly changing, but you can definitely have big major endings and beginnings around your identity with the sun, or with anything, with any of those placements.
Yeah. Well, I smile when I think about, my one of my younger cousins who's like a younger sister to me. She's a Pisces. My wife's a Pisces. My mother, and thankfully I figured this out before she passed away, was a Pisces. She's a Taurus. She was a Taurus, but she was a Pisces moon and Pisces rising. And I was like,
Mm.
when I figured out my mom's chart, like, oh my God, Rod, like I was just like, oh God, my whole life made sense. Like literally in New York City, like when I was like 10 or 11, I had to go to a grocery store with my mom walking down the block, like not that far. Like it would take like almost 30 minutes to an hour to go like, I don't know, a couple, let's say 80 feet. Because my mom with the Pisces moon and rising, you could only imagine. She had to pet every dog on the block. She's saying hi to every neighbor and hey, I'm just like, oh my God, mom. Like it was so
Your
embarrassing.
earth.
But
Yeah.
then after seeing her chart, I was like, of course she was a Pisces rising and Pisces moon. Like, oh my God. So it's really funny. But I do think one thing you're saying about coming home to ourselves, I think part of that also we will see, I always call it, right, with the Pisces energy and Venus being exalted in Pisces, that agape Christ-like love, the book of Ephesians, right? The more compassion, more empathy. And I think that's what this world needs now, right? Obviously, it's a song, right? We need love, sweet love, but it's like we need more compassion and empathy for ourselves first
Yeah.
and outwardly to others, right? Ra's got
Hmm.
to take care of Ra so then she's okay for her daughter, right?
Exactly.
I've got to take care of Eric, so I'm okay for my wife and kids. And that's really, it really is that to the bare bone essence in terms of how we need to integrate. And I think with the Virgo South Node, I want to know what you think about this. I think I like what you said about like kind of the daily things and the physical world, but I also think about with the South Node, we tend to need to release it. It
Yeah.
kind of will cut and separate and divide. And I feel like, hey, we got to stop being so self-critical. We got to stop being
Yes.
overly critical of others and so nitpicky. Nobody's perfect. That's for God, source creator, right? So we've got to kind of get into that humanity service of Virgo, South Node,
Hmm.
and stop nitpicking and criticizing everything. I tell my clients, right, we must all retire from the negative self-talk. That's no
Mm.
longer your job.
Yeah, that's what I tell every Virgo moon I talk to. What you just
I know the Virgo, but I got it. One of my sons has a Virgo moon. I'm the Virgo sun, but that Virgo moon is, ooh, that's rough. I think in some
Yeah.
ways the Virgo moon can be more challenging than the Virgo sun. And Virgo
Hmm.
moons, I don't know if you know this, like Pisces moon, super psychic, but the most
Hmm.
intuitive moon is the Virgo moon.
They all, yeah,
And they
they are
feel
very
it down in their
intuitive
stomach and their
differently.
gut. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. They would have a gut. I would say I love that you mentioned service because I definitely see Virgo as um, a sign that is very dedicated to being of service, but so is Pisces. And
Yeah.
so Virgo is of service to the material reality. It's like what do we need to organize? What do we need to prepare for, right? Because it's mutable. So it is in a preparation for things. It is in a and that's what all the and we want to appreciate that. We don't want to throw that to the wind, but we do have to realize that if it's also not serving our spirit and our soul, which is where Pisces comes in, Pisces is of service too, but it's of service to the soul, to the spirit,
Yes.
to, to, and if it's, if you're organizing to the point where it's taking away from your spiritual connection, where it's taking away from compassion and to connection to the universe, then it's a disservice. Then you're not accomplishing what your goal is, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just figuring out how to balance that out. Virgo can get, the pop culture where they're OCD and all of those things, but that, I mean, that can be very serious in an overly stimulated, dysregulated Virgo energy. We all have Virgo energy somewhere. We all have Pisces energy somewhere. And
That's
when
right.
we have the nodals, it's opportunities, like I said, to balance those out. And so you want to maintain your material reality and have a sense of organization and have a sense of there's an element of cleanliness and purification that goes with the Virgo, but you don't want to take away from our spiritual connection.
That is so funny. I'm cracking up
Yeah.
as you say it because I got to tell you, like, you see it so much with Virgo suns, a little bit with the moon, but Virgo risings and Virgo suns, oh my gosh, they are we can outwardly have an organized mess, but
Hmm.
Virgos mentally, it is like precise and detailed and like like I'm like a robot mentally. Like my work desk is a little, there's a little bit of clutter. It could be better, but Virgos and the cleanliness. Oh my God! Like summertime out here in Arizona, like I need multiple showers. Like I tell people, like nobody's gonna smell as good as me. Like Virgos, like we are about clean. You got to be clean, and that's so funny because I have a son who's a Virgo rising, and he's like, oh God, like he's like loves the shower. It's just so funny. So those are the things that are like, and that's what we talk about in astrology, right? There are some things that are like hashtag like astrology good, certain
Hmm.
transits, like that whole, you know, and it's not, you guys, this was not good, but it was astrology good.
Yeah.
The Trump first assassination attempt, right? It was Mars
Yeah,
conjunct
the Mars.
Uranus conjunct Algo in his 10th house by the midheaven. That was literal.
And
But
it
I
was
also,
aspecting the Mars on his ascendant, right? So it was triggering that
oh, it
aspect
was
that was,
squaring his ascendant. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, and it's textbook. But
yeah,
what's so crazy about it, right? It was the 13th, and the exact conjunction was the 15th, but still, right? It was
yeah,
right there. Everything was right there. But I also think, you know, this is what I tell people, right? The powers that be, they know, use, and manipulate astrology, gematria, and numerology as well. So we better learn it for good because they don't always use it for good. So
yeah.
I want to transition to, you know, we got something happening on the 7-7 portal. What are your thoughts about the little sneak preview of Uranus and Gemini, which will permanently go in till 2033 for 7 years in April of 2026? But we got a little preview on the 7-7 portal. What are your thoughts for this summer of Uranus and Gemini? And
Oh my God.
what advances do you think we may see technologically, communicate? Like it's going to be kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of that happens when Uranus goes into Gemini. I'm sure you've talked about it on here. It's that there is concerns about um you know conflict between like the US, within the US or
Oh
with
yeah.
between the US, and so there is a lot of that
Because
that
that was the American Revolution and also the Civil War, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that those aren't my specialty areas, but I am aware of it because you if you're an astrologer, you're just aware of it.
Yes.
And so so I would those are big things to keep an eye on. It is going to aspect Pluto in Aquarius and trine it, and so there can be leaps that really foreshadow a lot this year. Like you said, it's a foreshadowing year. I 100% agree with that, because everything kind of dips. A lot of the planets dip in to the next sign, the outer ones, and then they come back
Yeah.
towards the end of the year. And so there's just so much, and I do see us trying to balance out what is reality versus what is not, as we have, you know,
Mm.
the Saturn, um and it's with Uranus there. It's like there's sudden leaps in that. There's sudden leaps in communication. There's sudden leaps in the way that we can do things. And I think we're just trying to figure out how to function, how to incorporate that into our daily lives, or whether we want to. You know, there's a lot of people that don't want to do that. But I think one of my biggest, I would say it is a concern, but one of the biggest things I think is people are going to be really trying to figure out what is reality. Um,
With all the
and
AI stuff, yeah.
with, yeah, and
You're
that,
already seeing that in the music industry, the film industry, right? I'm part of the Screen Actors Guild, right? I did television, film, theater for years, and that's why we went on strike. The poor musical artists, they don't have a union like that, and you're already seeing so many songs and recordings of artificial intelligence where it's not the actual artist. And I think that it can be extremely detrimental to, you know, and cause a lot of chaos in the music industry, which is already crumbling. But I do think with Uranus and Gemini trining Pluto Aquarius, I think we're
yep,
going to get a lot of stem cell, a lot of scientific upgrades and research. You know, we're going to see a lot of changes, you know, that can be on the positive side. And, you know, with technology comes the good and the bad. So we got to watch out and be careful. But I do think there could be some, I don't know, some drastic cures or new ways of implementing things to help you with, you know, hands and knees and shoulders and stuff like that. It could be
yeah.
very Gemini Uranus. It's going to be. I my prediction is, Rob. But before we leave Uranus Gemini in 2033, we um we may no longer have these guys.
No, and that is one thing I agree with. The way communication, sudden changes in communication. I do think with those, it's that we are gonna, some of the retrogrades are gonna show us how, if we're, you know, are we gonna jump on board with these? Do we want to communicate this way? Is this, you know, something that we feel comfortable with? I know you're constantly talking about like the chips, but you know, how else are we gonna get rid of the phones, really? You know, there would be probably add-ons,
Well,
glasses.
it could be instead of a phone, it could be like a debit card that does everything. So the debit card could be the phone. It could be
That
that thin.
that's true. I We could have glasses that come up, or I've seen contact lenses
Well, they
be,
already have those glasses, those
yeah.
Apple glasses, and Apple signed a deal with Ripple. So, you know, we're going to be using the XRP, XLM, and Ripple to transfer the funds. You know, so there's a lot coming on. I tell people faith over fear. Yes, they may shut down the power grid or we lose the internet for a little bit. So always be prepared. Have some, you know, rice and beans and water. Be prepared. But we're going to be okay.
Yeah,
We
I
are going to be okay. Our galactic brothers are kind of they're here, and you know
yeah.
we're definitely going to be okay. So I want to ask you about, you know, a couple of your favorite placements, right? You know, we both probably get a lot of requests for synastry compatibility or love
Mhm.
chart readings, and I love doing it. But just in general, do you have like a favorite one or two aspects that when you see between two people, or just in general, that light you up for someone seeing a potential love or a good match, like something with Venus and another planet, or Venus and another sign and a sign or house? Just share like a couple that really kind of like you're like, oh, that's good, like that's solid love there, or something like that.
Yeah, I do. I always give the disclaimer when I work with synastry, which is one of my favorite things to do. Is I really do tell people that it's not how they get along. You know, a lot of people, they want like a simple answer. Does my Capricorn sun get along with their Cancer sun? Da da da.
Yeah.
And like, and it's not about if they get along, it's about how they get along, right? And then
But
there
also,
is,
but I love that you said that. But let me ask you this at the same time: don't
yeah,
you feel like when you're looking at any type of love or synastry,
yes,
and people don't understand this, the sun is like one of the last things you look at. I'm looking at
yeah,
fifth house, seventh house, Juno, Venus, Jupiter, Moon. The sun, I mean, sometimes I look at the sun just as little or as much as I look at Mars. So like how do you look at that or talk to people about that? Because that's very pop astrology, thinking about sun sign matches, because that's not telling the story.
no. And I will say the most underrated and underlooked at is your Mercury compatibility.
Ah, how we
I think because
communicate.
Moon's gonna be important, Venus,
Yep.
blah blah blah. But the most underrated compatibility is how you communicate, because there is no way for you to understand a moon square or a sun's, whatever, an opposition, some kind of more difficult transit. There's no way for you to really figure out how to work with that unless you can understand how the other one communicates. So the
Mm,
first thing I want to look at is how are you communicating? And then go from there, because once we have an understanding of, look, they process information differently, or
yeah.
when they're communicating, they have a certain
Style or
priority or style, and so you want to, even when I'm doing tutoring or anything like that, I really want to address the Mercury first to make sure you can even receive what I'm sending out. What is your learning style? What is your communication style? And Mercury is going to speak to that, and how it's aspecting the sun is going to speak to how they're able to consciously receive and give information.
I
um
love that.
yeah, and so that is one of the major things I'll look at that's completely underrated. Obviously, I like some good sun moon aspects. I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of some Venus, and people I think overrate trines. I think trines are completely overrated
Yep.
for
You
synastry,
need
because
challenging aspects.
yeah, and honestly, a trine can
Make it
make
boring,
things,
right?
yeah, it can get boring, or it's something you take for granted, or it's something that's not motivating you. If you have a lot of, sometimes I'll call it the Netflix and chill aspect, because if you have certain, because if you have too many trines, especially if like Venus is involved in the sun and like the moon and stuff, Venus moon stuff, where and you don't have other squares or other motivating transits, you guys
Yep.
could just they could be so comfortable and so enjoying the Netflix and chill that they kind of are not taking care of other things. They're not motivating each other. And sometimes when you have a lot of squares or oppositions, you can get pushed. You can have a relationship, especially if you get that communication under control and you have the trust and the understanding with each other, that you're not pushing them because you're judging them or you think that they're bad people. You're pushing each other to accomplish a shared goal, to accomplish
Yes.
a mission and your purpose in life. And if you can find someone that has the ability to push you and challenge you in that way, then you can grow and be, the best power couples of the world, right? And that's
I
really
love
important for
that.
people
Yeah.
to understand, that you don't look at a chart and go, oh well, you have all these squares and oppositions, it's going to be hell. It is if you're unconscious. It is if you refuse to see their side of their purpose, right? Because like your Virgo versus the Pisces. You have a lot of Pisces versus the Virgo in your life, and you're serving in two different ways. Your conscious awareness and purpose and self is paying attention to preparing and serving in on the same spectrum, but in two different ways. And so if you can understand that that's their role and that's their lane and this is your lane, and you can support that for each other and learn to balance each other out, that can be very powerful in a relationship. And that can be more beneficial than a lot of conjunctions and trines.
You're so right. And I
Yeah.
love the oppositions and squares because my wife is the Pisces sun and Mercury, and I'm the Virgo sun and Mercury.
Oh,
And I'm
that's
the
so
Scorpio.
powerful.
Yeah. And I'm the Scorpio rising. She's the Taurus rising, which is great for each
Oh,
other's seventh house. But so those oppositions, it is like that seesaw. And we have the same goal, but we may come at it in two different ways. but we've learned, right, we're almost up to 17 years of marriage, to see each other's point of view and perspective, and then kind of find a middle ground. Or sometimes we're like, okay, let's lean a little bit more this way, or sometimes lean a bit more this way. And so it is very helpful to have the squares and oppositions. I think, I don't remember, because, I didn't know astrology when I was like really single and dating, but I could imagine, older relationships where, yeah, it was like, no, this is kind of boring, because, it's just like these trines or conjunctions, and it's fascinating. But I love the intricacies. So let me ask you this: what do you think about like the Venus conjunct Pluto,
Oh
or
my God.
or
Oh
like the
my God.
Venus conjunct Jupiter, with like a partner, or even in the individual's chart? Like what types of things can someone experience, or in a love relationship, that they can experience? Because when I say Venus Saturn, immediately I'm like, do you like older? Do you like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
do you like to date somebody older? And you know what? It's almost 9 times out of 10. Yep, they do.
Yeah, and I mean Venus, yeah, and Venus Saturn can be good. I think for longevity, for long term, for more stable relationships, especially if you have some other stuff that's going to be more mentally stimulating, or I like mentally stimulated, but depending on what your needs are, because Venus Saturn can be a little whatever, can be a little boring too, if
Yeah.
you want something. But we were talking about Venus Pluto. So Venus Pluto is exciting. That's where you're gonna get some. It's
It's
dangerous though.
exciting till it's
I don't.
not exciting, Ra.
It's a dangerous aspect. Okay, if
The
you
stalkers,
have
right?
in your natal chart, you need to be so aware. You really need some good astrology, or some good therapy, or some good whether you really need that. You need to stay very self aware, especially if you have some difficult aspects to your sun, or there's Neptune gets involved, that can be
Ooh.
dangerous. Okay, and so in relationships, that can be really dangerous. But it always, I'm always of the mind that with self-awareness, with empowerment, and with people who really, really want to have a transformative, and they want to grow together, it could be possible. It is very difficult though to have some Pluto Venus aspects, especially if they're within like a degree orb, or they're exactly conjunct or exactly aspecting, that it can be very difficult to have a safe relationship. It can be very triggering.
So with the Neptune, were you saying the Neptune could be dangerous because of the deception, confusion, the delusion, and like the nebulous, like escapism energy, in terms of
Yes.
like maybe dating somebody that's addicted to pharmaceuticals or alcohol or drugs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have the unconscious element along with, because Venus Pluto can show obsession, power dynamics. It can really pull on some of the darker parts of you know the way that we are attracted to people. And so it can be really complicated. And if you have that in your chart, you have to be self-aware. Like sometimes you're the toxic one, and it's important to be able to recognize that,
Oh my
to
God.
to be able it's important to be able to recognize that, and I have no judgment. When I look at these, there
Yeah,
is no judgment, and it's important for people to understand that I don't see these as bad or good. I'm looking to see how you can work with the energy in a way that helps you.
I love
And
that.
I don't believe that any of this. I believe in free will. I
Oh
believe in
yeah,
exercising your free will, and by being consciously aware, we can use this energy in a more productive way. There is mitigating factors to this. There is a lot of ways that people have used these aspects in powerfully transformative ways for their own growth, but it is something you do need to be self-aware to do. It is something you need to um yeah, it can be those are some scary aspects sometimes.
Well, I want to mention two placements that I've seen to be pretty interesting and challenging for people, not as a couple, just individual level. Um, People having, the true Black Moon Lilith in the seventh house and Uranus in
Mm,
the seventh house, because,
mm,
sometimes they wonder about relationships or affairs or different things. And I've seen Lilith in the seventh house where their partner cheated, and then I've
mm-hmm.
seen Uranus in the seventh house where they could be extremely non-committal, and
Yeah.
they rebel against someone, like just smothering them too much. Like they need open relationships, they need freedom, but then at the same time they have other placements that where they're like, oh, I want to be with somebody and this and that. I'm like, well, then you got to like work on that Uranus and calm it down and use
Mhm.
it for like innovative business partnerships or like do something else. You know what I mean? Like, so I like to kind of maneuver and advise people on
Yes.
how you can integrate the energy into your life. And like you said, when you become more conscious of it, then it's not going to zap you and become that default kind of sub or unconscious, repetitive, poor choices or behaviors. You can integrate it and make it become an asset. And that's why I tell everyone, I don't care who you use, but I always say, right, if I was God or president, every human would get a birth chart. And I really believe every year, not just to keep you and I in business, but I think every year people should get a solar return chart.
Yeah, solar return charts are very insightful. And that's one of
Ooh.
the things I was going to say is that, some of these it's important to know when some of these aspects are more likely to be activated, right? Because if you have that Pluto, Venus in your chart, or you have the Uranus, I mean, the Uranus in the seventh house could be dormant, especially, Uranus in the seventh house for these Taurus seventh house people, like Scorpio risings, like you, with the Uranus going through the seventh house since 2018, that could really trigger and activate some of that, needing to have freedom, or, the midlife crisis transits, if you're having that Uranus opposition,
Oh yeah.
um, things like that, that can really activate those. Or I do study a lot of Hellenistic astrology and whole sign as well,
Yeah.
as Placidus and Vedic astrology or sidereal. And I do see that there is certain timing techniques that really work. There's certain,
Oh yeah.
your annual perfections. It's
I,
important to know
it's so good.
what house is currently activated. It's important to look. I like to look at sidereal for, my longer readings, or for people who I work with regularly, looking at their sidereal chart and seeing what time lord, right? Like, I had a major shift in my life of, I was in a Saturn time period, or Mahadasha, and then I saw a drastic difference when I switched over to a Mercury Mahadasha in my focus and what I was
So
focusing on.
explain for the audience, what is a Mahadasha and how do you locate it? Like how does that play out?
Yeah, so you would need sidereal software.
Right.
You're probably not gonna. I think you can get it on astro.com. I think you can switch the settings to get
Yeah.
it, but
I think I have that, yeah.
yeah, I use a sidereal app to get mine. And so basically there is time lords, which we have in whole sign astrology. There will be, they call them time lords, and you'll switch a sign. So they'll be like, oh, it's a Aquarius time versus like a Pisces time or whatever. There's all these different timing techniques, but
So would you say the
the
Mahadashas are kind of the same equivalent to
it's the
zodiacal releasing?
equivalent to the time lords in Hellenistic astrology,
Okay. Would
and
that
they're very
connect to the
similar.
zodiacal releasing?
Huh?
Would that connect to the zodiacal releasing?
Oh, the zodiacal releasing is a different technique from Hellenistic. But yeah, so the sidereal, though, there it shows you which planet is the most dominant in that time period.
Okay.
And it kind of gives, so during my Saturn Mahadasha, that was like over a decade long, it really highlighted Saturn themes in my life, and it activated my Saturn in my chart. And so I was working with I was dealing with people in extreme poverty. I was doing a lot of advocacy for opportunity youth, which, you know,
Oh,
and doing a lot of service work, which really speaks to those aspects of my chart. But when I switched over into a Mercury Mahadasha, I started my own business. I started becoming more business mindset. I started to do, which I had no concept or interest in during the time period that I was in Saturn,
I
you
love
know?
that. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it was like, it was a major switch. And I don't, deal with those, the level of intensity and the topics I dealt with during the Saturn time, in the way that I was frontline. I mean, I did street outreach for years. I was boots on the ground, and now I'm a lot more looking at it by helping people and consulting in their lives and how they're going to address these issues. Because I have so many people come to me that say, I want to help, I don't know how. I want to do this, but I don't know how. And so now a lot of my focus is more on helping people help people, and being a consultant for that, and having a business on how to communicate those things, where before I was in it, I was
I
boots on
love
the ground.
that.
I was
And I love how
doing work.
astrology can show the difference.
Yeah.
Right,
And
because we all
there's major
switch.
shifts.
We all switch. It's almost like we have like a new brain in different time periods, and we can literally switch careers, relationships, move across the country, all these things, and it can all be figured out through astrology, through transits, through the birth chart, through time periods, the annual perfections, all this stuff. So I love that. So as we get ready to wrap up, I love, we touching the bases on the relationships, but I want you to share with us, maybe looking at some of your cards, or picking out some cards for the astrology or for the collective for 2025. Does that
Yeah,
sound?
absolutely. So like I said, I really think that I want to pull a mudra for, especially for all, wherever Aquarius is in your chart, um wherever this is hitting you, so
The
that
Pluto
we
Aquarius. Yeah.
can, yeah, so we can be still. So if you remember, I was talking about in the beginning, there is a big call for a lot of us to be still. Some of us, that's not resonating. They're ready to move, especially people with retrograde Mars in their natal chart. But for a lot of us, there is a need to really be still so that we can hear the messages coming through, so that we can strategically plan for what we want to implement, in the upcoming spring, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of
For the real New
starting.
Year.
Yeah, it's the real new year, you guys. It's the real
March
one of
20th, the equinox,
yeah,
not January 1st.
right. So it's like planning that new world revolution, or the the word for the new year, what we do, resolutions.
Yeah,
So
because that's
um
why they always fall off, because that's not when you're supposed to set them. So by
yeah.
January 15th or the 17th, nobody's sticking to it anymore. And it makes sense. So if you really take winter time, or in Australia, New Zealand, summertime, for more introspection, when we get to 0 degrees Aries, then you're like bringing things out. You're showing off, like it's the new flowers, the new birds, the new animals. It's the birthing, the new beginning, right? And we start with Aries
Yeah.
season. So it does make sense. And then obviously, we've had the calendar switch, Gregorian. We should have 13 months. We can go on forever with that stuff. But you're right. This is perfect for us to be prepared for March 20th and the equinox.
Yeah, and I'm really there's so much going on. We could talk for, we could have a whole course on just that month, right? Because
Oh,
there's so much going on that month. But I will say, for real quick before I pull the card. So for Capricorn season, I always tell people, because I see Capricorn as the grandmother, and for the that holds up the structures of what has gotten us here. And it's an important time to honor that. It's an important time
Yeah.
to reflect on what has worked, what has been working, what are we going to keep moving forward. And then we switch to Aquarius, which can be more looks to the future. So we honored, we're keeping whatever has worked and we're pulling it forward, those traditions. And then now we're going to look to the future in Aquarius and say, well, how do we want to build on that? How do we want to reform the structures that are already here? And it is a time for strategic planning. Saturn, they're both Saturn ruled signs traditionally, and it's how are we going to strategically plan for what we're going to implement in the spring. So I do think it's okay for people to play with the New Year's resolution, to be like, what's sustainable, what's worked, what hasn't worked,
Right.
and to kind of you can play with it at that time. That's fine, and then to really strategically plan so you can implement that in the springtime.
Yeah, in Aries season. Yeah.
Hmm. And so I really, I mean, that makes sense too, because we're like, that's when we're doing our taxes. So you spend those whole months like planning, and then you actually do them, closer to that time. So ideally you would do them closer to that time. Not everybody does, right? But the calendars, um are interesting. The Gregorian calendar is interesting. So I love these mudra cards. I'm going to put the intentions in that it's what people, anyone listening, whoever it resonates for, is going to be able to use this to regulate your nervous system and help you be still, and to receive the messages that we're getting, to receive how to move forward. um Stillness. I picked the stillness. So I love that. And this is for intuition, truth, and communication.
Okay.
It's to quiet the mind. I have a Mercury, my Mercury's in Leo. So even though I am a Cancer, people don't always see that because there's such this loud Mercury, And
That's a good way to describe Mercury Leo.
yeah, but it has served me well in many ways. But this quiets the mind, brings breath, awareness inward, opens clear communication, and supports deep listening. So if that isn't what I asked for, I don't know what is. And supports opening the senses. And it gives you instruction on how to do this. So you bring the tips of the fingers to touch, palms facing inward, curl the right index finger inward, all the way to the second joint. Hold the
Mm.
mudra in front of the heart. Can you do it? Can you do this?
Hold the mudra in front of the heart. Well, I'll let
Yep.
you. I'll let you do it. I'm just gonna model. I'm not.
Yeah, so you want to hold this and put one down and hold it out in front of your heart.
Okay.
And then I want to hold this picture up. And it says, I open to sense inner stillness and knowing. So you hold this
Mm.
here and you take a
Inner
deep breath.
stillness and knowing. Yeah. And it's so funny. Even though Cancer is, I feel, they feel, therefore they know. Right. Cancer is like that. The still lake. Right. There's just, I know, baby. I had a Cancer aunt, and she always knew. And it's so funny in terms of the work that you were doing, because Jupiter in Cancer, right? The reason why Jupiter is exalted in Cancer is because who's your first teacher? Your mother. The
Yes.
divine, nurturing, teaching knowledge. People
Yeah.
think Jupiter in Cancer is about wealth. No, it's about the guru, the teacher, the knowledge.
Yeah, I tell people that Cancer is leading by hand holding. Cancer leads and teaches the baby how to walk, um, and really nurtures people into that sense. Versus like Aries, which is a leader, and they're like, "I'm gonna do it. You can copy me or not."
Yeah, they're the motivational speaker, the
Y-
yelling football coach, Jupiter Aries. Let's go, touchdown. That's a whole different
yeah.
energy.
Yeah, and so there's they lead in different ways, and that is how Cancer really does get on their level and meets people where they're at, and offers that nurturing that they need to get to the next step, because you can't just yell at a baby to walk. you know? You
No.
can't, or you can't, you can't always just, sometimes you have to stop and feed people before you can teach them how to fish. That's what I used to say when I was a social worker all the time. Is I used to say sometimes you have to give a person a fish so they can pay attention to how to learn how to fish. So yes, it's
Mm.
important to teach people how to fish. You don't want to just keep giving them fish,
Right.
but you can't always pay attention if you're hungry. So, and
Amen.
cancer knows that. Cancer knows that.
Yeah.
And my food metaphors go on forever and ever. I will say too, I have these fun they are cards that are dragon cards, and I remember the first time a woman pulled one for me, and I was like, okay, cancer card, or dragon cards. It felt kind of, I'm not gonna lie, like kind of silly, right? Like I was like,
Yeah.
that's kind of silly, but they were so profound. And it just resonated so much that I had to get my own deck, and that was years ago. I don't know what's going on with this.
And they have like what type of meanings? Like, so the dragon cards, like what do they discuss
um
or talk about?
so I'm just gonna pull one for the year, and it'll give a 2 minute explanation of it. Um, it's better to show you than explain it to you, of how the dragon that's supporting us and protecting us with these
For
changing of energy.
2025.
Yeah, for 2025. Oh, water dragon helps you flow easily around obstacles. And so
Okay.
this deck does mention Christ light and love, and it says Christ light and love are flowing, develop your psychic abilities, and go with the flow. And I think this really speaks to all the
This
Pisces
year.
energy. That is 100%. It is learning to go with the flow. It is learning to let go of some of the preparation of Virgo. It's like a lot of the details we can't really plan for right now because we don't have those yet.
Pisces North Node, you got to go with the flow. Yeah.
You do. And I do, it says Christ light in here, and I really see when they're talking, they talk a lot about different dimensions in this deck. They talk a lot about, Palladians, things like that. And I really see the Christ light as just love light. Like it's just,
Mm.
it just really vibrates on that love frequency, regardless of whatever spiritual religious trauma you have or not, or whether you resonate with Christ or not. For me in this intent, it's really just love light,
Yeah.
going back to um
I'm all about Yeshua.
yeah.
I love that though. So that's really awesome. So as we wrap up, I mean, what's the message for the collective for 2025? What do you think that our intention should be and that we should really be focusing on?
Well, just like the card said, I think that right now, be finding where you can be still, finding what area of your life you can really be still and figure out how you can go with the flow. I think the cards really summed up the message really well.
Yeah.
Because that is what we're gonna need. We're gonna have a lot of energy change. There's gonna be a lot of new implementation of things, where there's gonna be a lot of back and forth for the rest of the year of figuring out how we're gonna move forward as a collective, as like a world, how the world is gonna move forward. I think there's probably gonna be a lot of talk about um, how the world's going to be connected to each other or not be connected to each other. And so I think it's important that on a spiritual level, we're being still within ourselves and connecting to our inner standing, right? Like you say,
Yeah.
and being able to channel the messages that we're getting in this upcoming week and be able to process that through our body and our mind and our spirit. And so we are prepared to go with the flow. So we are ready to dance in the rain, as I like to say. Astrology can is great weather predictor, but you do have the free will to decide what you want to do with that, right? Like, are you gonna sit and pout about the rain, or are you going to go with the flow and you know
And embrace it.
and embrace it?
You
Yeah,
see the growth because of the rain. Yeah.
yeah,
I
exactly.
love that. So, okay, well, share with your audience again, how can they reach out to you and some of the different services you offer?
Yeah, so raintuition.com, and then the socials will be Intuition LLC. You'll see my picture on them. If like my picture's not on them, it's not me. Um, so there's a lot of fun and events. If you're in Arizona, there's a lot of ways that you can meet up with me in person or participate. And I have some sip and paints coming up. I have some in Sedona. So
Oh,
we're sipping. So I don't do the alcohol. There is a kava bar I do them at, but then in Sedona we're gonna do the astrology tea and paint. So we're gonna be sipping on the astrology tea and painting.
oh, when is that?
So that one is the first one is in February, and it's going to be on the Sunday the 16th, and it is with the Astrology Club in Sedona. So they'll be hosting me. There's a wonderful astrology club located in Sedona. And then the day before that, there's going to be this really, really fun event where they're going to have a bunch of people making about 1,200 meals to feed the hungry.
I
And
love that. That's
so it's going to
awesome.
be a great opportunity for like a couples retreat or a friendship Galentine retreat or just a self-love retreat where you're able to give back and then receive the next day. And it's going to
That
be
is
very
beautiful.
focused on synastry, and we can paint composite charts. So
That is
I have,
awesome, Ra. So
yeah,
can people find this all on your website?
yep, it's all there.
Wow. This has been so much fun. I'm glad we finally got to connect, my friend. And it's just like, oh my God, I know we could do like 10 hours talking about astrology. So I'm just so thankful. And I want the audience, you guys reach out, connect with Ra. And this has been another amazing Knowledge is Love Astrology podcast. You got a Cancer and a Virgo. Like I said, my favorite aunt was a Cancer. So she would just, I know one time she told me I was one of my first jobs and I bought like some fudge and I didn't get fudge for anybody in the house. And my aunt told me, she's like, that was so selfish of you. And I was like, oh. Like it struck my heart. I was like, oh my God, that was not my intent. I don't ever want to be selfish. So the next day I went back to Murdoch's Fudge and I got fudge from my aunt, my uncle, and my cousins. And you know what I mean? So it was just really, it was like really a great lesson for me to learn. And my aunt, she was just, she was the Cancer, water sign with the still legs, and just she was very nurturing and supportive. So it was really great. So I thank you for sharing all of your Cancer energy today with the collective. It was definitely felt, the Aquarius rising. And you guys, listen, go follow Ra. And thank you. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And share this with a friend. You don't know who can resonate with this and really receive a download and understand, and it just may change them for the better. It's tell them right how important astrology is.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know if I'd be alive without it, to be honest. Not to be dramatic, my Leo Mercury can be dramatic but there but it is. And I think that's funny, the story about your aunt, because it is really important for me to understand how people receive me. And when you say like, oh, like when she said I was selfish, like you felt it.
Oh God.
And that I was not allowed. I know you rap, and so I used to also rap when
Oh.
I was younger, and I was not allowed to rap battle though with my guy friends because they were like, Rachelle, what you say is too true, and it would like hurt their feelings.
Oh.
And so I couldn't. My Mercury is also square to Pluto, and so they were like, you're not allowed. Like they didn't want me to rap battle. I wasn't allowed to participate
Oh my
because
gosh.
it was too true. I didn't realize either that I was like channeling messages and things. So it
Well,
was
with
like,
Sun, Moon, Jupiter, and Venus in Cancer, and Mercury square Pluto, yeah, you were like, oh, Mike's got a runny nose and flat feet, and he
yeah,
can't compete, and he's weak in the street. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
you were saying stuff, and they were like, ouch, like, wow, that's not nice, right?
Yeah, so I wasn't allowed to do that, but I did a lot of inspirational music mostly in my alone time, and that got me through so much. So I really appreciate your music and you spreading that, and hip hop was such and writing poetry was an important way along with astrology that I was able to process my life and then be able to understand that through astrology really got me through some hard transits, some
Well,
really hard astrological.
I love hearing that, my friend, and I think
Yeah,
that is awesome. That is so, yeah, there's nothing more important than, the words. That's why we have to be kind to ourselves, you guys, and speak positively to yourself about yourself. So, Ra, I thank you so much for joining me today. This has been episode 291 of my Knowledge is Love Astrology podcast. Bye, everybody.